In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast, brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. My name is Ben Grant. I'm joined as always by JB. You can find me on Twitter at Ben_Grant. JB you can find at X's and Argos JB. And of course, you can find all of our content, spoken, written, or otherwise at xsandargos.com. JB, it was the slowest week we've seen in a little while in terms of transactions, but stuff is starting to boil. I wanted to start off our episode by talking about Henoc Muamba. If you had to bet right now whether or not he's coming to Toronto, and I should preface this by saying, we're recording this Monday night. It's fully possible by the time we finish recording that he's already signed in Toronto or somewhere else, or perhaps even Tuesday morning, in which case this episode is already out of date. But as of right now, he has not signed anywhere. JB, will he sign in Toronto, yes or no?
Yes, I think he will. I think that, he was on our radar as, a linebacker, which was an area of concern. I think he's a great player. I think that Montreal is one of those teams that is, not looking to sign players, are looking to run a pretty tight budget. And I would suggest that every signal points towards the Argos signing him, from Bear being restructured to, hints on Twitter about conversations being had. I just can't see Montreal getting into a bidding war. If they wanted him, they would have signed him already.
That's what, there's two things that you said that make me want to shout and also cheer at the same time. So I don't understand why Montreal doesn't want him back. And if it's just that the price was going to be too prohibitive, but he was playing at a really high level in 2019. He was the most outstanding Canadian in 2019. And you look at his stats, his sacks had tailed off, but that was more of a system-related thing than his skill. It's not like he looked any slower in 2019 than he did in 2018. He looked like the exact same high-level player, and he was flying all over the field, making plays. That's why he won that award. And I can't see... I just can't see why they wouldn't want him back. It doesn't make any sense to me, other than it's just got to be financial.
We'll get to this later in the pod, but I would put Montreal right at the top of the question mark organizations. I think that there's enough smoke around to suggest that there are some teams that do not want there to be a season at all. And I don't see a lot of evidence to suggest that Montreal is not one of those teams.
See, I don't see it that way with Montreal. I actually feel like they think they've got a good team ready to go. I think they do.
Why would they think that?
Well, a lot of people think that. Their betting odds are actually quite good. There's a feeling that Montreal is the only other team that has a chance in the East, not named Hamilton. The rest of, most people aren't believers in Toronto yet, and the Toronto no longer has very good betting odds, depending on the site that you look at. It's odd. I don't quite get it myself. I think Toronto's got huge value there. I think Hamilton at plus 300 is just like throwing your money away. But I don't know. I think a lot of people look at the Montreal team and feel like they're going to be good. I don't see it. I don't see it. I'm like you. I don't understand why, but I believe they think they're ready to compete. I believe that the Alouettes organization think that they're going to be very good this year. And so if they think that, do they think they're so good that they don't need the best Canadian player in the CFL? It doesn't make any sense. That there's nothing about that makes any sense to me, other than it's got to be money. So I don't know what to make of that. And then Bear restructuring, I interpreted it the same way you did, but a lot of people, a lot of CFL fans, and a lot of analysts interpreted Bear's restructuring as a sign that Muamba is not coming. I guess they view it as, we're restructuring Bear because he's now the guy we're going to go with, but we're now happy with his restructured deal. He's going to be our guy. I just don't see it that way at all. To me, I see the Bear restructure as we're freeing up a little bit of salary room And we're now paying you like a backup instead of a starter because we're going to bring in Muamba to be the starter. That's how I saw the restructure.
Yeah, I mean that's traditionally a restructure is done to bring in other players. It's not done punitively, or not solely punitively.
It can be done to bring a team under the cap sometimes.
Yeah, but it's not because like, oh, geez, you're not as good as the money we signed you for. We need to pay you less. It's usually not that nakedly, um, aimed at a player. So there has to be another reason for the restructure. Otherwise, I just think it would be hard to believe that Bear would take the restructure. I mean, maybe the market is so poor that they have him over a barrel and he doesn't think he could get anything as a free agent, but I don't know why he would agree to a restructure if it was not to improve the team.
Well, I don't think there would be a lot out there with him, especially if he's on the market with Henoc Muamba. That's not going to help. And there are not a lot of people looking for players at this point. Remember, Bear wasn't playing in 2019. He joined the Argos halfway through the season.
I can't believe that they're just restructuring just to say like, hey man, you're not worth the money that we signed you for.
And I think at the very least you do it later. I don't think if you weren't sure, to me this just smells of you're going to be playing a reduced role. So look, we're going to have to pay you less. If you're not okay with that, that's fine. We'll release you. But if you're okay being a mentor to some of the younger guys and still being there when we need you, then this is the deal we're going to need you to take. That's what it feels like to me. The second thing that is getting a lot of talk this week is the issue, and we've hinted at it, we haven't really discussed it yet, the issue of whether, or I can't believe we're going through this again, whether or not there will be a season, and if there is, what it's going to look like. Now, up until the only thing the CFL, the league itself, has ever gone on record as saying is we're plowing ahead. We're still planning on having an 18-game season. Preseason starts at the end of May. They've said that repeatedly. They said that's what we're pushing for. But you just kind of start reading the signs, and I just can't see any way that actually happens. Can you?
No, I mean, this is the league that, talked about there being a season all last summer too. I don't know why the commissioner and the league feels the need to project an image that's not true. There's nothing wrong with talking about a limited season. Every major sport has reduced their season. I think for the CFL to have been acting like we're the only league that's going to play a full season is idiocy. I mean, of course they're going to have a shorter season. I mean, I would say the season itself is in jeopardy. I think it's going to be very hard for them to pull off a season. So I think 10 games is, I think the goal that they should have just said. I don't understand why they need to pretend that there's something they're not. That it drives me crazy when they pretend like they're one of the big four. And it's like, you're not. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging who you are and that you're going to have to run an adjusted schedule. It makes it hard to believe anything they say if everything they say is just imaginary PR nonsense.
And part of me wonders what is directing them, whether this is trying to make sure that they honor the TSN TV contract, that they don't want to bail on that yet, because there's got to be a reason for it, right? So I'm thinking there are a couple possibilities for why they would insist that there's going to be a full season when they know full well there isn't going to be. So one, it's going to come back to money in some way. It always does. But is it TV money? Is that the issue? Is it the worry of players starting to leave? Is it they worry that if they say at this point, this early on, it's still being early March, if they say, look, we're probably not starting until August or September, if they're going to have half the league bail or some really high profile players bail, and then suddenly that hurts them. It hurts them maybe in terms of negotiation for loans or for sponsorships or what have you. And so they don't want to risk that happening, because we've already had some high profile players come out and say, if there's no season this year, they're gone. Like Speedy Banks, for example, has basically said, it's this year or nothing for me. And who knows how he might react. And he's one of the more high profile names in the league, one of the better players in the league. So what if he left? What if 3 or 4 guys like that left? Now it's even harder to get sponsorship. It's even harder to negotiate any kind of terms with TSN and your TV deal. It's harder to negotiate with the government because now your league looks like it's on shakier ground. You know, what's going on over there? So that's the only thing I can think, is that they're hanging on to this, not because they think it will happen and not because they, you know, are making an effort to be dishonest, but just rather that they don't want everything to fall to pieces and they're worried that it might.
I don't know. I mean, I certainly have no. I mean, there's not really any reason to have any confidence in the commissioner's office. In truth, I don't think there's a long record of the league crushing it on many topics. I think what's really frustrating for me is it's just such an unnecessary issue. You're going to have to renegotiate these contracts. You're going to have to come to terms with a percentage pay. Like, all of this stuff needs to be negotiating. I don't know why they're wasting all of this time now when they should be talking to the Players Association and they should be hammering out what's a 10-game season going to look like? What's your pay going to look like? I mean, it makes no sense, like we always, hope is not a plan. A plan is, let's wait and see how the summer goes. Maybe the fall will be pretty good. Vaccinations should be at a much higher rate. We're going to start Labor Day weekend. We're going to play through. I don't know why they don't just come out and say that and negotiate with the players and then know that they can stick to that instead of, just hoping, which is just not a smart strategy. Unfortunately, it is a strategy adopted by the government, by major organizations. The CFL is not alone in not acknowledging the reality of what's happening here. But I do find it frustrating that they are not being proactive and coming up with, a system that works, that is reasonable.
I wonder if part of it is that they don't want to show their cards, because then they don't have any room to move at all. Like, I wonder if they know full well that there's not going to be a full season, but if they say that really hurts them in terms of negotiation for permission to play, because they still haven't been given the go-ahead from the government. That's something a process that they're going to start going through now. And if the government comes back to them and rejects the plan, at least now they can say, okay, well, what if we make some amendments? What if we narrow this down to a 10-game season and start in August? Whereas if you narrow it down already and then make your proposal and it's rejected, well, now what?
Well, and so, not to get too conspiratorial, but maybe there are some organizations that are perfectly fine with their proposal being rejected.
Maybe some. And obviously, Toronto is not among those. I think Toronto would love nothing more than for there to be a season.
I mean, we are, but I do look. I mean, this is not just me making it up. I mean, the people who follow the league, and the same thing happened last summer. There were whispers of teams that would rather not pay out salaries and take the loss to run a season without fans and without the walk-up money. And I can't see why that has changed. I know people feel like, well, if they don't have a season now, that'll be it. But it does not. It would not surprise me if there are a couple of teams who are fine with mothballing again because they don't think they're going to win this year, and they don't care if other teams are mad.
I think that you're losing money this season no matter what. Every team is going to lose money this year. And the fewer games there are, the less money they will lose. And so I think there are certainly some teams that are maybe hoping for a shorter schedule. Maybe some hoping there is no season at all. I'm not quite there with you yet on that point, but I'm starting to see more of that when I look for it. And I don't know how much of that is just, basic psychology and how much of it is actually happening. But yeah, I think there's something certainly to what you're saying. Now, what about fans in the stands at all? Like, have you seen anything at all from this government that would indicate there's any world in which they're going to allow even a small percentage of fans into stadiums?
I mean, you can look at the NFL, you can look at the NBA.
Yeah, but look at the Canadian government. They sent
the
Jays
agree.
down south, and the Raptors are playing in Tampa with no fans.
I think that there is movement on bringing in fans. Will, again, maybe come the fall, things will be better. That's why, to me, I think pushing it to a Labor Day weekend kickoff makes all the sense in the world. If you're trying to convince the government, you need to show that you're reasonable, and you need to show that you have a plan. And your plan isn't, well, we just want to run our season like we always do. Like, of course that plan's going to be denied. They can say, well, who made this plan up? This is not a plan. This is just you wanting to run the CFL season. I mean, that's idiotic. Where's your plan? How have you adapted to this new environment? I don't know. I just feel like they're just looking to get told no. I mean, if you go and say, well, we just want to run our regular season and we want fans, there's no chance that gets approved.
You don't even think at like a 10% capacity?
No. Maybe in the fall. Maybe when our vaccination numbers are decent. But there's no chance that the CFL is going to get something that the NHL doesn't. Or Major League Baseball. Like, if Major League Baseball and the NHL cannot leverage, the CFL cannot leverage.
I would think there's a bit of a fear among ownership of starting in Labor Day. And I think that's part of what is also driving this determination to start, maybe even if they don't run a full season, not to start that late. Because when you start Labor Day, you are now starting after people start watching the NFL, because everyone starts watching in that third preseason game, which happens third week of August, and people are already in NFL mode.
Maybe the August long weekend is the better one. To start at the beginning of August.
It's important for, the diehard fans are going to watch no matter what. We'll go and watch either way. It doesn't matter when you put it on. But there are a lot of football fans who watch the CFL because there's nothing else going on, or there's just baseball. And they're football fans. They want to see football. And there's football in June, July, August. And then they get hooked. Their team's doing well. And that carries them through the rest of the year. There are quite a number of people that fall into that category. And yeah, I believe if you start after Labor Day, I think you're going to lose a lot of those. The diehards will be there, but it's the fair weather fans, the people that probably aren't listening to this podcast in early March, that maybe aren't going to be there for that. So I think there's a legitimate concern about that, not only from ownership, but probably from TSN as well, probably from everybody involved with the league. So I think that's a legitimate concern. All right, the last thing that I want to get to today, JB, is something that has really been grinding my gears over the last week. I've heard a number of sports reporters, columnists, podcasters who have expressed the opinion that Toronto's signings this year are not to make Toronto a better football team, but to draw attention to Toronto. They refer to them as billboard signings that get everyone to notice. Look over here, everybody. Here's a big name that we just brought in. And to me, I just don't see that at all. This is not the same as bringing in Chad Ochocinco to Montreal or bringing in Andre Rison all those years ago. That was a little bit different. It's not even the same thing, I don't think, as bringing in Ricky Williams. It's more like that, but it's not the same. I don't see these as billboard signings. I see these as they're doing their best to make their team better, and it happens that a lot of these names are big names.
I don't think so either. I think that they are, in my opinion, they are trying to find the Tampa Bay angle. They are trying to find the market inefficiency. That there. How do you get ahead? You get ahead by finding players that other teams are not looking at, and I think it's a great experiment. I mean, they've obviously raided the XFL, and these guys have NFL names. And look, if they all wash out, then we'll know that was not a market inefficiency. That was a market efficiency. And then you try and find something else. You find another angle. I don't have any issue with it at all. I think it's just jealousy. I don't think there's any two ways about it. The sheer number of players that they've signed, they're bringing them up to give them a shot. None of these guys are making huge money. It's not like they're signing them to $1 million deals, or blowing up the salary cap of the league, or, they're just bringing in a ton of guys and seeing if there's any miles left on any of these tires. And, I think it's smart. I think a lot of teams have not done it. And we'll see if it pays off for the Argos. But the idea that they're just doing it to get noticed, I don't think it just doesn't ring true. I mean, it would make sense if they were signing a player and they were given a big bonus, and they had a big press conference, and they were making posters. I mean, they're not doing any of that. They've signed a ton of American guys. They're going to throw them into camp and hope that 50% of them hit.
First, they're going to hope there's a camp.
Well, I know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, hopefully, I hope the CFL has a relationship with the NFL on a level where they can talk to the NFL about what they did. Obviously, I don't think we can use all the technology they have up there. But my hope is that they're close enough that they can talk about what was learned and what worked and what didn't. And I certainly hope that the CFL is doing that.
Well, not to get back into our Randy Ambrosie conversation from before, but he was on Canada Football Perspective this morning talking about how they are actually speaking to not just the NFL, but all other leagues, like globally, that they're in conversations with leagues in Europe, that they're in conversations with the major sports in North America, and they're actually trying to see what they can get from each of those leagues. So they're not sort of going into it with their eyes closed and ignorantly assuming, well, we know better, we can do our own thing.
I hope. I mean, I hope that isn't like a guy in the 590s saying that he's talking to general managers. Yeah, I mean, I hope they are actually talking to people.
There's an interesting article on 3Down. I think it was John Hodge. I apologize if it was someone else, but I think it was John Hodge that wrote about how NFL players historically have done when coming up to the CFL. And he looks at some of the more high-profile examples, and as he teases in the headline, not well. Why do you think so many NFL players come here and fail?
I mean, I can only guess. But I mean, I think it's a variety of things. I think that, first of all, I think that there's probably, there has to be in many cases a kind of big time, attitude, where you're rolling in the town and this league is kind of, the minor leagues, and I'm going to be able to dominate. I think that probably plays into it, because I think most American players disrespect the talent level of the CFL.
And I don't think it helps them when they come in and suddenly they're shoved on a school bus to transport them between their practice facility in the stadium and things like that. In a lot of these cities, most of the facilities are better now across the league, but it's still not anywhere close to what they're used to dealing with in the NFL.
I think that the truth, to pump the CFL's tires, I think the truth is the CFL is an elite league filled with elite athletes. And a lot of the guys that get pushed out of the NFL are not successful in the CFL because they are not the same elite athlete needed. Now, in the CFL, the athletes are smaller, but that doesn't mean that they are not of the same elite level. I think that, if you're a heavyweight fighter and you drop down into a new division, it's not easy to do, and I think with the NFL guys are built for an NFL game, and those skills don't necessarily translate into the Canadian game with the much wider field, and you have to be, faster and quicker. You have to be able to cover in space. The skill set is different. Obviously, they're still great athletes, but what made them a great NFL player does not make them a great CFL player.
I think if you are an NFL player, even a moderate NFL player, and you come to the CFL and you fail, I think it's because of you. I think it's either that you didn't take it seriously, you didn't work as hard, you let off the gas a little bit. If you can't make it in the NFL, you have to give that same 100% now trying to make it into the CFL. Because whether or not there is a drop off, or whether or not we're talking about that they're just, just different, you can't make it in the CFL regardless of who you are if you don't give 100%. And that's, I think, mostly what happens. You have NFL players come to the CFL, they think they can take it a little bit more easy. And not to say that they don't work, not that they don't try, but not as much, not as hard. And it's just that little bit, and that's enough for them to fail. And I think once there's a little bit of discouragement, once they get hit in the mouth that first time, they're like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore anyway. And I think that's why so many people bail.
I think the other thing that comes up is the talent level is just not that different. I mean, if you look at the XFL, and they didn't have many American stars, but they had guys who played in the NFL. They weren't out there dominating. I think the level of talent of players who are outside the NFL, whether it be the XFL or the CFL, is incredibly high. And I think that players who are fringe NFL players do not automatically qualify for the CFL. I think it just is a statement on how good you have to be to play in the CFL. And I think that too often Canadians who maybe are not involved in coaching or involved in football look at the CFL as like, the AHL or AAA. And it just isn't. It is an incredibly elite. It's more like, to me, it's more like a soccer reference where you might have sort of the Premiership and the Bundesliga or something along those lines, where these are different leagues. And yes, in the NFL, they have bigger, stronger athletes because of that game. But I don't think that I don't think the level of athleticism is that different. So I think guys who can't stick in the NFL have a hard time sticking in the CFL because for the same reasons.
Well, that's going to do it for us today on the X's and Argos podcast. Hopefully by the time you listen to this podcast, we've signed Henoc Muamba, and even more people are outraged at the state of the Toronto Argonauts and their salary cap. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, tell all your friends about us. For JB, I'm Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.